Today, we're going to look at how changing the value of a painting can change the mood of it. So I've drawn out, actually, first of all, divided a quarter sheet of Arch watercolor cold press 140 onto my quarter sheet. Did I already say that? Quarter sheet. And roughly sketched in a pretty similar scene, a little barn sitting in some trees. And we're just going to, first of all, start off by tinting. We're going to paint this one first, but I want to tint that one so it has a chance to dry. And what I'm going to do is use a very light wash. Probably could be considered a tea. You do not want it to get too dark. If you get too dark, then adding anything darker over the top becomes a challenge. So what we'll do is, this is Aureolien and this is raw Sienna. I'm just going to get a mix of that. Excuse my messy palette. Now I want to get enough to cover the whole paper. I'm not going to leave the sky out or try to paint around anything. I'm just tinting the entire paper. And you will see why we're doing that as we continue on. And I am going on a gut feeling that tells me that that may not be enough to cover the entire paper. So I'm dipping into my water and I'm trying to keep my palette tilted so I don't get any of these other colors mixed in. I don't like to waste paint, so get a little bit more of that Aureolien and brighten it up a bit. I think we're getting close, but I've got a little something on my brush. A little bit more. Okay, so let's, oh boy, do I do that like every time? I want this tipped up a little bit, so I'm going to grab my little roll of paint here and stick it under, just to give it a little bit of a slant, and that'll help move that paint move down the paper. Let gravity help me. Oh goodness. Okay, I'm not going to worry about it. Not going to worry about it. But I am going to just keep on adding. Now I've gone in and just loaded my brush. And then I'm dipping into the water. You see how barely tinted that is? If it's not perfectly even, don't worry about it. It's a landscape. It's not going to be perfect. In fact, sometimes, most of the time anyway, it's more interesting if it's not perfect. So very, very light wash of that. All right. So we're going to let that dry. I think I also want to, at the same time, do this one, but this time I'm going to add a little bit of Quinacradon. Let's go with Quinacradon Magenta, and just going to drop a little bit of that, grab a little bit more. This time it's going to be a little bit thicker of a mix. Clean that up real quick. It's still, the water's kind of draining down. We want a little bit more paint in this mixture. I think that's Quinacradon Magenta too, so I'll just grab from that little puddle. Careful not to get too much red in there. because it is a very strong color. So maybe a little bit more. So you see there's a little bit warmer of a color. This one is a little bit cooler in color temperature. This one's got more red, so it's warmer. And I can still see this dripping down, so I'm going to soak up a little bit more. I don't want it blossoming back up, although that might be kind of cute too. Okay, let's just go for it. Grab that. What I want is a good bead going here to get that wash moving down the paper. I've just grabbed a little bit more water in between. Almost running out, so let's get a little bit more water in the brush. This is where it's super important to have a brush that holds a lot of paint and water and also releases that back onto your paper. Very, very important. I'm going to go all the way back down over that. You can see there's a little bit of a value difference. This one is a bit darker. I'll set that aside. And as this moves on down to the bottom, I want to soak up that excess water. I'm doing it just with the paper towel coming right along and letting the paper towel drink in that excess. So what happens is this will dry, and if there's moisture under here, it will blossom back up into your painting. So unless you intend that to happen, then you want to make sure your edges are dry. Okay, so let's let that dry for a second so I don't move my hand through the wet paint. Okay, this is dry. I helped it out a little bit with my hair dryer, but let's start with the sky on this one. This is going to be bright sunny day, so we're going to have a very light light in this one, and that's going to be the roof. So that's going to help to inform the mood of this little part. I'm grabbing some cobalt blue, and this is a 1/2" Princeton wash brush. I don't know what that paint color is right there, but I kind of like it. So it's probably cobalt teal, I'm not sure. But I'm just going to start out very simple sky. I'm not getting too complicated in here, just slapping that color down with my little wash brush. Really, the looseness is what I like. So that is pretty quick and simple. Now I've got a little bit of green here. I believe that might be leaf green. Maybe. I got some new colors on here. I'm not really sure. Just use what you have. I've also got some Hooker's green. And I'm going to plop a little of that in here. That's a very unnatural looking green, so a little bit of raw sienna in there kind of naturalize it. Even a little touch of the red, and I mean a touch, because look at how much that darkened it up. I think I'll add a little touch more of the Hookers. So let's imagine the sun's coming from this direction, so some of the darker greens can be We'll burn this side. Careful of that little building. Now this little green that I just picked up there, I think was the one I just got yesterday. It's a Primatech, so it's granulating. Really super quick. Don't want to get too precious with this stuff. More of that green. I do like that Aureolien or raw sienna in there. Now I can even rinse my brush, bring some of this right down to the roof line there. Flat brush is awesome for that. Try not to lose that little building. I've got a little bit of Sugarlight, I think that was that. A little bit more green. Just want to get darker under that tree. Just drop in a little bit more of the lighter green there. Let those kind of fuse together. Remember, we're not getting too precious. Reminding myself, we're not getting too precious. So then, let's come to this foreground and really just indicate a field. And a little more water and spread that out, spread it around. Cool it down a little bit up there. A little bit of burnt umber. Thin it out. Got some purple there, and I can put that with this burnt umber and kind of come right under that house, whatever it is. I'm going to go down to a little bit smaller brush. I'm going to go to a round. I've got a little bit more control when I use that one, so I just want to indicate the front of that barn. Make that side a little bit darker. Imagine that is maybe a opening. A little bit more burnt umber and pop that in there. I don't want it to look too plain, even though this is a little practice piece. That's pretty close, and in how it looks kind of like the trees. Let's see if we can remedy that a little bit by just kind of indicating some shadow on it. It doesn't have to be defined. Let's actually drop a little of the raw Sienna in there. Okay, so that's just a very, very simple sunny day rendering. I don't want to get too involved in all the nitpicky little details, which it's so easy to do. If you're me, it's even easier. Not necessary though. So we're going to move on just as soon as I do one more thing. The values need to be a little bit closer in here to each other. They've got to be unified, so pull a little bit of that down. Same here. The more contrast there is here and here, the better to make that roof line pop out. And also, I could just come right across there. That was too thick of a line, but it's okay. I just dabbed it out. Okay, so we're going to move on to this one, and this one's going to be a little bit more moody than this. This is pretty straightforward. Yeah, bright sunny day, whatever. Get lots of those up here in Portland. No, we don't. So this one's going to be a little bit more subdued. It might be kind of a hazy day, more like sun is kind of there, but it's hazy, so some of the values are going to be weaker. I'm going to probably need to freshen up my colors here. Okay, so I went ahead and cleaned my palette, and I'm going to use more of the browns or even grayed down greens. I don't want that to be as bright and sunny as that. So I think what I'll use is a little burnt sienna, probably more, a little burnt sienna, and maybe some of these a little bit of blue in there. A little bit more raw sienna. I have 2 raw siennas in my palette in the same little well, and I think this one is the Daniel Smith. So I'm going to mix a little bit of that, and then we're going to go, try not to be too wet. But I just want to add, I'm not going to do anything to the sky here. Come right down to that roof line. Maybe leave some little, I forgot to draw the little house in there. Oh well, it's okay. This one doesn't have, somebody tore it down maybe, or it fell down. Let's get a little bit of that leaf green mixed in there for some variety. Just gonna get my brush wet, rinse it of the color, and soften the edge down here a little bit. Got some cobalt blue there. I'm gonna mix that in with my burnt sienna. Get some darks in there. And I'm just going to come right shall we go with that smaller brush again? Kind of grabbing for colors. Let's do a little bit of that. Oh, I forgot to tell you what color that was. It was, can't remember now. It'll come to me. Get my brush a little wet and drag some of that down. I feel like I want to lift a little out of there. Grabbing a little more raw sienna. And I think I want a little bit more burnt umber in there. Gray that down a little bit with my Cobalt. I'm going to cool that foreground down a little bit with that. And I want to just, on this one too, a little bit more of difference on that part of the roof. Okay. How's about a little bit darker in here? Now, the only thing I'm thinking about that is I don't want that big of a value change, so I'm going to lift a little bit of that out. All right, enough of that one. You get the idea from those two, the difference that you can get in mood by changing the values, tinting the paper, and even let's do one little more experiment on this one. See if I can't just kind of add a little extra something in there. Okay, so moving on, we're going to go to this one, which is going to be more dusky dark. So as I'm sitting here looking at this one, I'm realizing that the values aren't wide enough to really make this believable, I guess you could say. So what I want to do is get some darker darks in there. And this one so far still drying, but the value range is shorter. But right now I feel like they're kind of equal, honestly. This is definitely a lot brighter, but I want to make my values pop here. So that's kind of bugging me. Let's get that out of there. And I'm going to go for darkening up some of the under the eaves. Now my paint is a little bit too watery for some of those pops of dark that I want. So I've got myself a little bit of burnt umber, some of that, I believe that's carbazole violet. And then I'm going to grab some ultramarine blue just to darken that up even more. Oops. And we're going to bump our head. Just touch that in. Drag it down a little bit. Soften. Darken this part back here. And even some little detail back there, not much, just a touch. So I've got French, or keep wanting to say French ultramarine. It's not what I have. I have hookers. And I'm grabbing ultramarine blue deep. And then I'm going to put a touch of this magenta or whatever it is. That just totally grayed it down. So I'm bringing it up a notch with some more green. Now that's a nice dark green. So So let's just come right next to that barn. Soften that up a little bit. And there, now we've got a higher contrast, and there's some interest back there too. You see how that made that pop? It made it pop. So now I see a bigger difference between these two. This one definitely doesn't have the dark like that one does. But I do want a little bit more. Maybe to make that barn stand out just a smidge. Not real dark, but just a touch. Okay, I'm happier with that now that I've put some darker darks in this one. So you can see the change in the mood just by changing the value range. I feel like that could be just a little touch on the not quite as light. So I brought that down just a little bit, put a little glaze over the top of it. Okay, so now we're going to do complete switcheroo of things, and we're going to do, instead of the top of the roof being the lightest area, we're going to make that darker. So this shape is going to be a little bit darker, and there's going to be lighter values up in the sky. So I am going to need to clean this palette. Hold on a minute. I think what I'll do with this one is to do a complete glaze. Should have done this first. I'm going to completely glaze the paper with a really light wash of cobalt blue. So I'm completely taking out the white of the paper by doing that. And I'm mixing it over off to the side. Very, very thin wash, tea wash. We don't want it to be, like I said earlier, too dark, because then anything else that you add in addition to that is going to need to be darker still, and then it gets kind of muddied up. So let's just grab our cobalt water. I know I don't have quite enough. I should be using a bigger brush probably. So So I'm having to keep going back into my puddle and my water container. I don't want to do that. Should have used like a brush that was twice this big. Just for your information. I was not thinking. Same thing, we're going to clean up and then let this dry. And we'll come back and paint after that is dry. But since I had forgotten that part, now I want to do a little bit darker value in this one. So we're going to reduce the contrast in the values even more than this one. So we're going to bring down, the roof is going to be not as bright, and the color, all the contrasts are going to be shortened up. So let's just see how it goes. I'm going to do some raw umber. Nah, that's not raw umber, that's burnt umber. And I'm going to grab some of that cobalt blue. And how about a little sap green in that? It's going to be my trees. Oops. Don't want too much water on my brush, so I'm going to dab a little bit of that out, and we're going to even grab some more raw sienna. Forgot the building in that one too, and that one. I only remembered it in that one. Good grief. Put a little bit of cobalt blue in that more. I feel like the sky is going to be too light. Got a little bit of cobalt blue into that. All right, back to my smaller brush. And we're going to need some burnt sienna, cobalt blue, I feel like I want some brighter in there. Help it pop out just a little bit more. More burnt umber. Not too dark though. A little bit more raw sienna here, I think, in the... Actually, everything else is too wet around that, so I'm not going to attempt that yet. Cobalt blue. A little bit of this violet there. Mix that in with that burnt umber. We're going to just come under a little bit more. And then for the field in front, I'm going to go back to my raw sienna and that magenta. Actually, I think a little cobalt blue in there might be nicer to gray that down. I'm tired of messing with that little brush. So here's my stroke. Look how much nicer. How much more space that covers. Feeling like that's a little bit too orangey. Blue and orange gray each other down. And my raw sienna might be nice over the top of that too. A little bit more of that. I don't know if that was a complete success, but this is practice, so getting some brush miles in with value is a good idea always. So this is almost dry. We'll let it dry for a little bit longer until it's completely dry before I come back and go over the top of it. This is all the way dry, and we are going to do this final one in a different way. So we're going to kind of flip the from the light value on the top. This is going to be dark. I'm going to leave the sky light, but the rest of it is going to be darker. This is completely dry, and we're going to do it a bit differently than the rest of them. We're going to flip it around a little bit where we're changing the lighting again in a different way. We're going to make it maybe more of like a after the sun's gone down kind of situation. So I'm just going to go with my burnt umber, and I'll put a little bit of the cobalt blue off to the side, so there's a little bit of that. And then I do want a little bit of greens. Let me see what I want to do. I could do whatever that is with cobalt blue. That works. Kind of keep it in a limited range. So let's just go ahead and put in maybe a little of that green in there. Leave some sky holes in the trees. That's always a good thing to do. Maybe the sun's touching the tips of them. How about, I'm just going to bring in a little sap green kind of for interest. A little bit more cobalt green. Cobalt green. Cobalt blue, that would be. I'm just going to want to perk up some of that with a little bit of green. Whatever that is in that puddle, I'm just grabbing. The lightest light is that first tint. Of the paper. Kind of lost my little building, but you know what? I'm going to make them darker anyway. So don't fear. Come all the way up with that. It just could probably stand to be a little bit softer, but I'm not going to worry about that either. A bit more of that cobalt blue. I'm going to want to let this dry before I come back over the top with my darker barn. Okay, let's let that dry. Here we are at the final place, final painting. And now that it's completely dry, I'm going to get that little barn in, but I'm going to do it darker. I don't want it to stand out. I want it, well, it's going to stand out in a different way. It's going to be darker, and the roof is going to be darker. So those are going to be the differences. And we're just going to stick with the same colors, cobalt blue. Maybe I'll go with burnt sienna, actually, instead of the burnt umber. A little more lively. And I'll get a little bit more blue in there for the roof. So I'm going to make the roof a little bit lighter than the building itself, but it's still going to be dark Actually, that's probably not quite dark enough. And I feel like I need a littler brush. So let's just get that paint a little thicker. More paint, the deeper the value is going to be. More pigment. Okay. So, while that's drying a little bit, I'm just going to add in some scrubby little brushes in here. Just for interest. Okay, so in order to get this petal darker, I'm going to need a darker blue actually. And I'm going to go ahead and go with that Ultramarine Deep. I'm just going to mix it in the same petal there. And that time I went with the Burnt Umber. Well, we don't want the yellow in there. So even maybe a little bit of that, I think that's Mineral Violet. So that's going to give it a more of a gray, maybe more blue, maybe more burnt umber. And then I'm going to go thick with this. Oops. It's not very stable. Kind of looks like pasted in, but I'm not going to worry too much about some of those little finicky things. That helped a little bit. A little bit more blue in there. I don't know, it kind of looks like a shadow, like a moonlit almost. How about a really grayed down green? Let's look at how sap might look in that. Ooh. That yellow is getting in my way. Now that is way too green, but If I add this mineral violet in there, it's going to gray that down. And then maybe even a little touch more of the blue. Bring those values a little closer together. Kind of imagining that this is now in almost the dark. But the sky is still light. Again, I've got too small of a brush in my hand, but I don't want to stop, because when you stop, the paint starts drying, and then that can be troublesome. So I'm just gonna go with the flow. Use the tip of my brush and just add a couple of funky little details in there. How about some tree trunks? I say I'm not going to do it, but then I do it anyway. Okay, I'm going to stop because my intention wasn't to make perfect little paintings, but it was simply to show you guys how the value can change the mood. So really simple exercise to do, and it's really fun to put it on these quarter sheet papers. It makes practicing really super fun, and you can see them side by side. So anyway, sorry that it was so scattered and all over the place, but I wanted to do it quick. And anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and go out and try something like this for yourself. And by the way, I got this exercise out of Robert Wade's watercolor workshop handbook, which I don't know if it's still available on Amazon, but I'll definitely check and see and leave the link to that in the description below. So yeah, there's lots of practice things in here that you can do, and this was just one of them. How changing values can change the mood is something that I got from Robert Wade's book, and I went through this little scene of my own in a similar way to what he did here. So if you want to go check that out, I'll try and see if it's on Amazon. If it's not, it's Robert Wade's Watercolor Workshop Handbook. You may be able to find it somewhere else. Anyway, before I close off and say goodbye until next time, I want to take the tape off. That is something that's actually super fun to do, to see how these all look without the tape on them. It's like, I don't know, it's really satisfying. You got to figure out which ones are overlapping the other ones. that one and the middle one. Crisscrossed over the top. And there you have it. 4 little scenes in 4 different lighting situations. Anyway, hope you guys enjoyed this video and go try this for yourself. Take a quarter sheet of paper and divide it into quarters, quarter by quarter. And until next time, happy painting, you guys. Take care. Bye-bye.